Good morning and welcome to another edition of Seeing and Believing. This segment right here is going to be part two of part one, making COVID-19 into a black disease. Basically, you're going to see me looking down because I do have notes right here. I've taken some notes. So it's not me avoiding eye contact or trying to be rude to you though, but I just need to be as accurate as I can with what I'm going to tell you. First and foremost, I want to show you one thing, one potent weapon which they're trying to use to convince the people of America, perhaps the world, as to, at least right here in the U.S., that it is a black disease. Take a look at this right here. Okay, we're back now. So tell me, what did you see? Same trick, same old tired tactic of using black celebrities, black entertainers, politicians to do their bidding, to try to convince the world, convince black people, convince others that it's primarily black people who have the disease. Here's what they're not telling you. Like, let's just say, for instance, Chicago, where they claim that 70% of the black people dying there are dying of COVID-19. We have to ask ourselves, of the 70% of people who are dying, were all the people tested for COVID-19? And when you come to that 70% percentage, what is the ratio that you tested against other groups? Did you test 70%? You make sure that it's a very even number across. And did you make sure that pretty much all of the people were from the same socioeconomic background? That's kind of important right there. But to be honest with you, no, they don't. They don't. I'm going to tell you how they get that number, a 70% percentage of death. What they do is that they will oversample black people, or they will oversample a certain demographics. Well, here we're talking about black, so we can't say black. How they get that is that I'll give you an example. They'll take like 1,000 black people. They'll take 700 Caucasian or white people. Then they would take about 500 Latinos. They would take about 300 Asians. And what their main goal is, the desired outcome, is to make sure that it's blacks who are at the top, who are presented as the most, who are infected or who are dying. And these gullible celebrities do not know any better, pretty much. A lot of them don't bother with reading. They don't bother with investigating. They don't bother with fact-checking. They don't bother with the difference of opinion. It makes them too uncomfortable. And a lot of them pretty much are just pawns of the pharmaceutical cartel, vaccine companies. They're pawns of politicians, certain political parties. And notice one thing, though. Now I'm going to have to look at my notes right here. They primarily focus on, here we go, on Chicago, Louisiana, Maryland, and Michigan. However, what they do is that America is like 50 states, right? So you're leaving off a lot of them. I can go over a lot. Let me just say, what about Rhode Island? What about Utah, Idaho, Delaware, Arkansas, Vermont, Connecticut? There's Florida, there's California, there's Colorado, Texas, Pennsylvania, Connecticut. You get the drift. And with those states right there where the majority are not black, they don't dare mention what the color is. And I think that's a good thing, though, because, I don't like the idea that this whole fight against COVID-19 has turned into something racial. It's turned into something racial to a point where we got to say that this group has more, they have less, and so forth and so on. I think it makes us look bad as a country. It really does. And unfortunately, that's the way that it's been in America. America has been a very divisive, racist country since its pretty much inception. But I do want to say one other thing, too, though, that the notion that they're spreading, that's very false. They're using a term called blacks have underlying diseases or illnesses that others do not have, supposedly that makes them more susceptible to death. And that's not quite true. Because right here in the United States of America, 74% of Americans die of pretty much the same 10 ailments or diseases. And those being heart disease, cancer, unintentional injuries, Alzheimer's diseases, diabetes, kidney disease, stroke, and cerebral, vascular disease, influenza, pneumonia, chronic lower respiratory disease, suicide, and there's one condition by default, that is drug overdose. That would be like the 11th one. Now I can take about six of those from that list right there and tell you that this top 10, that the majority of the people who die from those illnesses or diseases are not black. No, they're not black at all. And we know that drug overdose, that like 90% in the emergency room who die of that are definitely not black. So so that's not true right there. Or what they're telling you in regards to blacks are more prone to because of so-called pre-existing conditions. And then they use a term called poverty. They say poverty plays a role in it. Blacks are like 14% of the U.S. population. Caucasians are like, what is that, 72%? You have a greater percentage, or the majority of poor people in America are white. They are not black. 14% of the population versus 72% of the population. Yes, you have more white people who are rich, very true, who are in control of things. But at the same time, in the opposite end, you have more who are poor too. And when you're poor, it affects your service, the quality of health care that you receive. Once again, we have celebrities, black celebrities, who are not checking or bother to do their research, to bother checking with stats or anything like that, or to look at a second opinion. And I think that they kind of know this. But also, too, what's so detrimental is that when you start using celebrities in their high profile, people will believe it. People will pick it up and they will believe what they're saying. So to end this, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. You can see a curve kind of like shifting. I guess to some degree, things are stabilizing, but we still have a ways to go. But it just seems like towards that very end, it seems like their goal and agenda is to make it seem like the majority of the people who have this modality are blacks. And we need to be very careful with perpetrating that paradigm. The reason being is because if they see that a group or a race is more at risk or is dying more, it'll make them more susceptible to being the victims of experimental vaccines. And the last thing we want is for the pharmaceutical cartels, companies, vaccine companies to go to black communities and pretty much experiment on them like they said they were going to do in Africa. So those are just things that we need to be careful, mindful of, and think about. And do not be afraid to call out celebrities on these things. I will end that right here. Thank you for joining me. Until next time, another segment of CNN Beyond.